Okay, good morning, everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, a warm welcome to our panel debate on front-loading energy efficiency to net zero. We are sitting here at COP26 in the blue zone, and it's great to see everyone in the room, and a warm welcome also to the people who are following us online. I hope you can hear me. Can everyone hear? That's really good. Okay, so my name is Mai-Britt Poulsen, and I'm a senior partner and a director with BCG in London. And we are the exclusive consultancy partner to COP26, and we are delighted to be here with all of you today. I'm joined by the state. I'm joined up here with two phenomenal global leaders who are also energy gurus when it comes to energy efficiency and energy solutions. So I'm really looking forward to this panel. Before we get into the topic, let me just introduce our two panelists here, and I'm delighted to have you with me today. So let's start with Fatih Birol, who is a global leader. He is an economist and he's an energy expert, and he's the global executive director of the International Energy Agency. And under your leadership, you have transformed the International Energy Agency into a true global leader when it comes to climate policy. And it's truly impressive. You're also a very famous person because you've just been nominated this year as one of the most influential leaders in the world by the Time magazine, one of the top 100 most influential leaders. And then you made a tweet at this COP that has become super famous. We'll get back to that. I've heard many CEOs quote this tweet in the last in the last 24 hours. Actually, we'll come back to that. And then we also have CEO of Arçelik, Hakan Bulgulu, here with us today, a very, very interesting leader. He's a global leader, CEO of Arçelik. He's also a climate campaigner, very active, and he's an influencer actually. So if you have Instagram, you should go and follow him. You will get a lot of inspiration, I promise you. Under your leadership, Arçelik has transformed itself to become an inclusive, sustainable, and responsible company. It's a world leader in the Dow Jones Sustainability Index, and already by now you have achieved net zero global production, which is really, really impressive. You've also been on an expedition or many expeditions when it comes to mountain climbing. So not only climbing the career ladder, you've actually climbed real mountains. And I was super impressed to get to know you and to look at this book, because in 2019, you climbed Mount Everest. And I was able to see some of the video footage, and it is incredible to hear your perspectives and ideas. You're climbing the mountains to raise climate awareness and raise awareness on the climate crisis. And I'm looking forward to reading this book. It's not yet been published, but it's coming soon, hitting the market. So I can really recommend this. Truly, truly impressive. Great. Okay, so now we will get into to the discussion and the panel debate. And I'm going to start with you, Fatih. We're going to talk about the energy efficiency solutions. So on our pathway to a clean energy world, global energy efficiency is often an overlooked solution. Not many people talk about it. We look at the wind turbines, we look at the solar and the renewable energy, but we don't talk so much about energy efficiency. And I think this plays a big part of the solution. What can public and private sector companies do to drive this energy efficient solution?
So very many thanks for inviting me to this session, and thanks for the introduction. May I also make an addition to your introduction to Mr. Bulgulu?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Great.
So I have two colleagues from the IEA here. They know very well that I am a very hard worker, and they suffer under that. But when I talk with Mr. Bulgulu, when he tells him what he is doing and all his activities, climbing the summits, mountains, what he does with Arçelik, I feel I am a lazy man. So this is I can tell you. So I really admire his energy. So it is better not to talk to him so often. So because I feel I have guilt feelings about myself. So
I follow that when I started to look at the video footage.
I didn't look at it. I don't have the intention to look at it. To be honest with you, I'm happy as it is. But I may also want to take this opportunity to congratulate you, Mr. Bulguru, for the recognition by Prince Charles for the sustainability efforts you have been making in the last few years, you personally, but actually as a company. Now, when it comes to energy efficiency, this we at the IEA, we look at all the fuels: oil, gas, solar, wind, nuclear, all of them. But I nickname energy efficiency as the first fuel. This is the first fuel that we look at it. Then first energy efficiency, then look at the others. However, energy efficiency doesn't get the attention from policymakers that it deserves. This is the big problem. In fact, energy efficiency can provide solutions to climate change, air pollution, the budget of the governments and the citizens, and at the same time energy security. So I don't know any other single energy option which can provide answers to those questions. I would like to give one example why energy efficiency, a very concrete example, why energy efficiency is very important in the context we are in, the climate change. Now, we talk about the coal, the role of coal, how to bring coal consumption down. Some countries say yes, some countries say maybe, some countries say no. Why coal is a problem? Because we have huge amount of coal power plants around the world, especially in Asia. Now, why they are building, why they have been building? Because the electricity demand is very strong. The electricity consumption in, for example, in developing Asia is only a small portion of Europe where we are. It is their right. With the increasing income levels, they buy electrical appliances, they have lighting, and the industry sector use electricity. But now coming to my story, in India, Indonesia, think about the map. India, Indonesia, Thailand, Vietnam, all ASEAN countries. Look at this region, China. The single largest driver of electricity demand growth is air conditioner, by far. Air conditioner. Now, when people use air conditioner, electricity demand goes up, and you have to build power plants. Yet, in this region where close to 3.5 billion people live, the only 10% of the households have an air conditioner. 10%. It is more than 95% in the United States and in Japan. With the increasing income levels, people in these countries will buy air conditioners for thermal comfort, and it is even, for example, much hotter. In India, it is 50 degrees Celsius. In Baghdad, in Iraq, it is the same. It is their basic, very important right to do that. And yet, there is no problem there. But the issue is the following. In those countries, an average air conditioner efficiency rate is 1/3 of what today you can find in the shops, in the wherever you go. In other words, an Indian household, to provide the same thermal comfort, needs to use 3 times more electricity than a Japanese household. Just the same thermal comfort, because it is inefficient. Why? There are no standards, there are not enough norms, and the manufacturers don't have a visibility or the predictability there. From that point of view, I think we cannot leave it to the manufacturers' decisions. Not everybody may not have a sustainable perspective on this issue. There is a need to put the right regulation, large standards for all these electrical appliances. UK government and the IEA is working on super product efficiency, putting the standards and norms around the world so that we can save energy, save money, and save emissions. One final word. Some of the colleagues may know last May, we had a global roadmap to net zero. I think everybody is using it, investors, companies, governments, etc. And when I look at this, one of the things need to happen, the work to reach net zero by 2050, global energy efficiency improvement need to accelerate 3 times than we have now. And where will it happen? Basically, the products, the so-called durable, white durable products, in addition to, of course, industry. And I stop here.
Thanks for sharing that example. It's a very impactful example. It's the same solution to the consumer or the household by consuming three times as much as mature markets. And that I know Hakan will have a perspective on. Hakan, Ashalik is a global appliances manufacturer. You have a major footprint. You're basically serving the world, so mature markets and developing markets. What can manufacturers do to lower emissions?
The answer is a lot, and a lot more than they're doing now. First, Dr. Birol, thank you for that addition, but he's a mentor of mine because actually policy making has been far behind in this area. That's why we are where we are. And I think he's really an opinion and thought leader in trying to tell the world the direction that we need to go. Yes, we all maybe agree, but how to get there is slightly different. Please listen. And I love his efforts on regulation, because it's not often you'll get a businessman saying, I'm for regulation. In this area, I am for regulation. I'm for very aggressive regulation everywhere around the world, because in Europe, and you know, Europe is a wonderful example. Yesterday, I called the Green Deal a good deal, and I really believe it, because what Europe has done essentially is set a great example for the rest of the world to follow. But it is only an example, because even if Europe really goes very aggressive in its standard setting, it's only 8% of global emissions. The emissions will come exactly where Dr. Birol mentioned, and those are places like Bangladesh, Pakistan, where penetration is extremely low. And not just air conditioners, even refrigerators, you're talking about 11%. I mean, you cannot tell a community not to buy a refrigerator. And in those markets, regulation is absent because it's not a priority. And everybody has this notion that an energy efficient appliance needs to cost more. And the consumer can't afford that. There's no price elasticity. The government thinks that because most of it is imported, it'll cost them more. None of this is actually factually correct. And I can cite many examples. But first, why is what we do important? Because 45% of our business is in Europe, and the rest is in emerging markets. We manufacture in places like South Africa, Pakistan, Bangladesh, India. You know, the list is long: Vietnam, Thailand, Indonesia. But exactly where this growth in consumption is going to come, which is going to cause a massive growth in emissions. If we take the right precautions now, we can prevent many of those, and I would say, dare to say, hundreds of those power plants that will come, coal power plants that will come. And I think not only reducing emissions, that's one effort. The NDCs, the governments are pledging, they're fighting, arguing. I think amazing progress. But companies need to take the lead, even in the absence of regulation, and clean up their act. And they will clearly be rewarded by consumers, because consumers, you listen to the young people out there. I listened to this activist yesterday, Clover, very, very clearly just saying to us, wait a minute, you know, we're not included in this process. You need to include us in this process. That is why we're frustrated. That is why we're angry. You're talking about our future. You're an old guy. She's partially right. But this is our future, and you're not letting us be part of the dialogue. And I think they will react by voting with their money. And so companies who are actually on this path will be rewarded, and the others will just disappear. And you know, time is short. My final word on this is, everybody talks about 2030, which seems a little bit abstract. Dr. Birol famously said, first fuel, right? This is what we need to attack to get there. I think I heard you call it the magic button, because it's easy. You just have to flip the button. The technology is here, it's mature, it's available. With very little of the funding we're talking about, it doesn't have to have a cost. It can be scaled up even more. I mean, I find it ridiculous that this isn't being done today, to be perfectly honest. But I can assure you, we will do it ourselves. What I will leave you with is that 2030 may seem like far away for you. It's only 425 weeks away. It was 429 weeks when I last used this analogy. And what does that do? I think for our teams, it brings it home. So from here on, I will ask our teams every week, now there's 424 weeks left. What have we done last week? Now there's 423 weeks left. What have we done last week? And I think that if we take an approach similar to that as businesses, we'll get there much quicker because there's a lot to do.
Thanks a lot for sharing that. So basically from ambition to action, being even focused on a weekly basis on the roadmap. Yeah. Thanks for sharing. Fatih, can I ask you, just building on what Hakan said here, why is this not happening? What needs to happen from a government and private sector? Now we heard a CEO talk about what Arshalik is doing, but what needs to happen to really move this with an emerging market focus?
So I think it is such an important issue that it cannot be left to the luck that we have good CEOs or bad CEOs. It is a very serious issue. So Mr. Bulgurlu can do it, but Mr. Brown or Mrs. White would not agree with it for different reasons, ranging from profit maximization to other things. Now, what needs to happen is two things. One, regulatory measures. Second, fiscal measures. Regulatory measures, governments need to put the right standards and norms there, and many of them don't know it, how to do it. For example, my colleague here, Mr. Motherway, and his team are organizing. The last one was with Indonesia and before with Brazil. We are working with them, the Indonesian government or Brazilian government, how you are going to draft a legislation for the efficiency standards for refrigerators. So there is no know-how there. Sharing the best experiences, and when it is turned to the legislation, when it turns to the regulation, then we see the impact. So this is there is not enough know-how by the governments, and some governments still don't understand the critical importance of this. So this is one thing lacking. The second thing is that some of the efficiency measures may require some upfront investments, and how to make sure that these investments do not pose a burden on the consumer's pocket is a critical issue, and many governments make extremely good success stories. I guess you are Danish.
Yes.
No, yeah, Denmark is one of them, for example. Japan is another one, Japanese government. In fact, several European countries are very good in that, providing some incentives to the consumers in order to buy, giving 10% more expensive option, whatever it is. It can be the engine of a motor of a industry facility, or it can be a refrigerator, it can be television, it can be a car, which of course this 10%, if it is compensated by the government, the difference between the good and bad efficiency product. But then of course we know that it pays back very quickly as a result of lower energy bill. So we need two things. One, the regulatory measures. The second one is the financial incentives for the consumers, which is going to be, should be put on the table by the, again, in a framework that the governments create by the financial institutions there. Some do, but it is not a, I wouldn't be saying the truth if it's a big portion of the financial institutions there. I think we have one colleague who does it here from time to time, one of the banks here with us, but it is not a common practice, I should say.
This is very interesting. I wonder if we would ever get to a global standard on energy efficiency. Hakan, business leaders are moving, and Arshalik is indeed a first mover in this field. You've actually done a lot of things without regulation. And I remember there was a story you told me about going into Africa, buying a company and then really pushing the standard from D&E to A. Could you talk about that? How and what were the outcomes? Did you win or lose market share by being a first mover?
When we bought DeFi, I think it was 2011, almost all cooling products sold in South Africa were E, so the worst offender in terms of consumption. And we're talking about a country which has rolling blackouts, regularly. They simply have not managed their power grid. They have not made enough investment in power. They derive a lot of their power from coal. There was a deal a few days ago to actually finance a transition for them, which I was very happy to see. But essentially, energy has always been a problem there. And they simply had not thought of tackling the consumption side. So we voluntarily, when we bought the business, decided to only sell A, so the highest energy rated appliance. Everybody first reacted saying, wait, A, you're going to lose market share because this is a market where cost drives everything, and you will by default be more expensive. B, the government won't really understand what you're saying, so you won't be able to drive regulation or incentives. As you mentioned, incentives are hugely important. So in the absence of incentives, in the absence of regulation, we voluntarily made that change, and our market share went from 35 over the next 5 years to, I would say, 45% roughly, because consumers understood that they were paying less for power, and over time that had an impact. Second, governments very quickly understood, or the government understood that in this way they were saving significant investment they would have to make in coal-fired power plants. My calculations were over 5 years, because the whole market changed. The competition had to follow up too, was 2 500 megawatt coal-fired power plants. So yes, it worked. And we're trying to do the same now in other places where we have dominant market share, 40%, places like Pakistan, Bangladesh, huge populations. It's going to make a big difference. And I think we will continue to do that.
Already making a big difference. And I think this is a very good story and value proof. Can I ask, as a CEO, was it easy to get the organization along? Because
No, it's very difficult. I mean, that's part of the reason why I took the risk to climb a mountain. I'm not a mountain climber. And when you read, you will see it took me 8 months to train and prepare and break the problem down. But I am an engineer. The reason there was, if you take personal risk with a purpose, everybody stops and asks, why is he doing it? He has a great family, young children. He has an amazing job. It looks like, being the CEO is never an amazing job, but it looks like that. So why is he doing it? And that often, and coupled with, of course, there's this amazing awe, or everybody thinks about the mountain at some stage of their lives, and it's always in every presentation you see it's a mountain that's climbed. So there is in human psyche place for mountains and summits, and I think that process, together with actually picking some very low-hanging fruit in the company early. I'll give you an example. We started using discarded PET water bottles in our washing machine drums. And 50, 60 million bottles may not seem like much. It is actually, but it's in the context of total consumption. But it fires up the imagination of the engineers, because they suddenly see A, they can do it, and B, it lowers the material cost, so it's net additive to the balance sheet, and it's a success on all fronts. It doesn't take away anything to do the right thing. And slowly, it got a life of its own. And I think now every one of my colleagues around the world is convinced that this is a way to differentiate. This is good business strategy. And they feel much better because they can talk to their children, look them in the eye and say, I'm doing everything I can. Whether it's reducing the amount of plastic we're consuming, recycling more, reducing our carbon footprint. I mean, literally attacking everything at the same time. So we all feel better for it.
I love the example about the risk taking, right? And also showing what it takes to climb a mountain, right? Because that is what we need to do in business, transforming systems. Thanks for sharing that example, and also what happens practically on the ground in leadership. Fatih, in terms of the clean energy transition, you made this famous tweet here at the COP where your organization came out with new analysis on where will the pledges take us if we are able to deliver. Can I ask you, is this a possible mission to transition into clean energy, including energy efficient solution? Is this really possible? I hear a lot of people who are worried because of the speed we need to move with.
It is, in fact, when I look at the numbers, it is my job to look at the numbers every single day, because at the IEA we are so lucky that all the energy data is at our fingertips around the world. What I see is, regardless of COP26, COP27, whatever, a new global energy economy is emerging. It is coming everywhere. It is the solar, wind, efficiency, electric cars. It's coming, mushrooming. And it is not only driven by the climate change concerns. It is driven by also because it makes economic sense in many respects. Now, what we have done is we look at all the pledges and commitments made before and during COP, including the methane. There was a very important methane pledge as well. And what we say, if all those pledges were to be implemented, global temperature increase can be limited to 1.8 degrees Celsius. And it became, yes, famous, but I think it is good to read this 1.8 being happy and love the IEA, but in fact, they should look at the next line, what I say, if they are fully implemented. So this if is very important, as French say, with if you can put Paris in a bottle. So if and if and if and if. So therefore, it is important to make sure that the countries will do what they say they will do. And one good news here is that the COP presidency has now assigned the International Energy Agency to every year to track those pledges, what governments said and what they did, and what is the thing, the difference. We are going to be, Mr. Bugut, the gendarmerie of the global energy system. We want to make sure who is doing what and publish if there is a like temporary provide policy advice. And here, energy efficiency has a central role in all of them. Energy efficiency, especially in the household and the industry sectors. These are the two areas because in the transportation sector, we are already seeing a major transformation is happening. But in the households and in the industry sector, energy efficiency should be at the heart of it if we were serious to reach our goals. When we make our gendarmerie job, then we will keep a very close eye on the efficiency improvements, because it's one of the easiest to see if they are doing a good job or a bad job.
Very good. And do you have which markets should we follow? Do you have any first mover markets in your head that we can all look to and be inspired by?
I think when I look at in terms of energy efficiency, I mean the long-term champions is Japan. To be honest with you, when you look at the Japanese in almost 40 years. But the important thing is I would like to see energy efficiency improvement, especially in the emerging world, because they are buying new things, they are building an infrastructure. If they make the wrong decisions there, and they may lock in the inefficient infrastructure, which will take a lot of time to change it, improve it, replace it, and so on. Therefore, I think we should keep a good eye on what is happening in the emerging markets. Having said that, if you allow me, I have to run for another, how shall I say, event. We are going to see each other again, I'm sure. And many thanks for inviting the International Energy Agency to this meeting. I'm sure Mr. Bulgul will tell a lot about his performance in business and in the climbing the mountains.
Very good. Thanks for now.
Nice to know you.
Okay, we have a few more questions. Hakan, is that okay with you?
Yeah, sure.
Very, very good. I wanted to ask you about energy efficient products and the consumers. So we heard now about giving an incentive for consumers to buy more energy efficient products. When you look at the emerging markets, where quite frankly, a lot of people don't even have access to the grid and knows very little, and you look at the mature markets, how do you see the consumer landscape moving and the consumer perspective and sentiment around energy efficient products?
Yeah, energy efficiency is not a clear concept to the consumer. So I think the most important thing there is really equating energy efficiency with buying a product or service which is far better for the planet. And if we can do that in the minds of the consumer, the most recent studies by BCG show clearly that consumers are ready to pay that difference. Are they really ready today? I'm not that sure. But I am an optimist. I said earlier, I brought sunglasses to Glasgow, so
Yes.
positive thinking and it'll get there. But that's the holy grail. That has to happen. Consumers really need to be aware of how much energy they're consuming in the home. I mean, up to 1/3 of the home's energy is these appliances. They need to not only consider it when they're buying it, but also consider changing their appliances. Because if you have a 10-year-old product, you can reduce the energy consumption of that product by up to 60–70% with a new product. And at that point, it really makes sense to change it, as long as the old one is being recycled, of course, which is a completely different topic.
We have I don't know if we have, yeah, it's coming back, yeah. So when we differentiate between mature and developing markets, so in mature markets I definitely get what you are saying, but you know, if I live in Bangladesh and I'm still washing my clothes in the river, how do you think about educating consumers there?
Well, that's where regulation and incentives will become really important. And it doesn't have to be the Bangladeshi government. It can be a coalition of G20 countries that are funding that, for example, that transition and regulation, because fundamentally, it doesn't matter where the emissions come from. This is the nature of this problem. And I think that's still a very low-hanging fruit to really attack, as you heard Dr. Birol say, you know, in the emerging markets, if we can make sure when this consumption is growing that the impact is lessening, then we have less of a problem to deal with later. But if we say, okay, let it go in any way that it does, naturally, let them have the lowest cost product because that's what they can afford, then replacing that is a much more expensive and timely problem. And if we have only 425 weeks to make a difference, now's the time to get those regulation and funding systems in.
Yes, absolutely, I agree. And if I may build on what you said, when it comes to recycling and replacing products, I know you also have quite some experience with that in terms of circularity and how to reuse.
Yeah.
How do you think about that?
When we started creating our own carbon credits by actually replacing old appliances with new ones, and this is how we've become carbon neutral in our global manufacturing operations, you end up with the problem of what's happening to the old appliance. And we couldn't find, this is often the problem when you're pushing the boundaries of sustainability, the ecosystem's not there yet. And you have many recycling programs across the world, but actually how much of the product does get recycled, I'm not sure. And in our case, we couldn't find one. So we built a recycling facility, a giant sort of, I like to say Mad Max-like facility, you know, 30-meter ceilings. And we've recycled about 1.5 million appliances, and we're brand agnostic. So if your product is a competitor's product, doesn't matter. We still take it, recycle it, use what we can in our own production, and then give it to industry. And this way, you're actually saving the emissions caused by energy used when the virgin materials are being produced as well. And 1.5 million appliances, if you think of how much space that takes, is a lot. So I think while we're on this drive of efficiency gains, we also really have to watch what we're doing with the older products and make sure that with the new products we're creating, we have circularity in mind, that they can be recycled much easier. Another example I'll use, in all our small domestic appliances, we've stopped using things like styrofoam, plastic, ink that is toxic. And now it's all made from recycled materials that can be fully recycled again. So I think, but there also you have to push the envelope in terms of creating an ecosystem, because there aren't the firms ready to supply you with scale. But as you start making those decisions and push, I'm realizing that others are coming in, and it's possible to do it. You just have to be very determined. And I mean, my message to our team is we will not have something as like styrofoam in any of our products. They look at me and say, it's impossible. I say, well, let's try. And we're getting there. It's taking time, but you need that kind of determination, absent of return calculation. Obviously, you're not going to bet the company on it, but it's okay if it comes back in 4 or 5 years as opposed to 3 years, because there's a complete other measure in there, and that's value for nature. And when you put that into the equation, actually, it should have been done yesterday. And that's the way we're thinking today at Arçelik.
Very good. It sounds like you are very deep into the R&D also of the company.
Yes.
How do you keep educating yourself? I'll just, maybe the last question here.
Yeah, I mean, learning is key. Not saying what you don't know when you don't know is also another lesson I've learned. But places like this is very nourishing for me, COP, because you know, you get exposed to subject matter experts, and you learn a lot of aspirational things, but also actually what can be done. I mean, it's an accelerator. If you like learning, this topic is amazing because we're at the forefront of it. A lot of investment, a lot of smart human capital like your firm are now focusing so much energy and resources on this topic that if you like learning, this is an amazing area to learn.
I think all business leaders, head of state, politician, no matter where you work and live, I think education and learning is indeed the way forward. Your employees in Arçelik must be so proud on what have been achieved.
Yeah, I'm proud of them. I mean, it's them who does it. I just, with the leadership team, help set the direction. Thank you, though.
Yeah, thank you very much for coming here, and I fully agree with you.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Let me know what you think about the book later.
Yes. I want to show everyone the book. I'm sure it's going to be available on Amazon. I'm definitely going to read it. Looking forward to it. Thank you.